Hello, everyone, and welcome to another PCFX fan club episode. I'm Benjamin Yoder here with my co-host Matt. I use your last name, LaFrance. Do you want
Yes.
that out there?
That's okay. It's. I think it's actually in the credits of Welcome to Pia Carrot when it first starts up.
That's
The
true.
fan
Actually,
translation.
you're
The fan
absolutely true.
translation.
So, so we are talking. Yes, you were on the original development team, right alongside Babo.
That was when I
Yeah,
lived in Japan. Yeah.
I finally did the deed after many years of betraying Matt and not accepting his favorite PCFX game. I sat down and played through Welcome to Pia Carrot. So I think we wanted to just kind of like have a discussion about this game a little bit. I know Matt has been pushing for a long time for people to check it out, but at this, and I imagine a lot of people have, played it at this point. But I think there's some things that like I thought that would be cool to kind of like verbalize a little bit more. There's a lot of things about Welcome to Pia Carrot that I think, even as somebody who is engaged with the PCFX, it was not necessarily clear like what exactly was happening with the game and exactly how it functioned and things like that. Um, so I think I wanted to just have a discussion to kind of like verbalize those things and then also talk about like the narrative part too as well. So I think that's going to be the plan. I mean, the video game. We're going to talk about the video game today. Gameplay, story. That's what video games are made of mostly. So Matt, you have been a long time Welcome to Pia Carrot fan. And I think we've talked about before, part of your legacy with the PCFX is that you imported, or your friend imported a PCFX. And then one of the first games I believe you guys played was Welcome to Pia Carrot. Um, I think that's the case, right? Like that was the original set he imported, right?
I mean, honestly, the details are a little fuzzy on that. It's not the only thing that we were interested in on the PCFX. It's definitely not the only game that we imported for the PCFX, but it
Mhm.
was definitely one that like we were both like, ooh, there's a game that's got it's got anime titties in it. Let's
And he
check
goes,
this out.
yeah, it also, I mean, like, keep in mind, this is like the 90s, and like, this is very hard for
Yes,
me to remember as like a 6-year-old at the time.
right.
But like, erotic
I was
material was
I
a
was
little bit
19.
like more rare, I would say. I'm sure it's out there on the internet. Don't get me wrong, you could find it, but I think it's today, it feels like it's a lot more just kind of everywhere to some extent.
Yes, you're definitely
Like,
right
I
about
load up
that.
my Twitter feed and it's just kind of there.
Yeah, there was a time
So,
when Google Images was just half of it was explicit material, and that is not the environment in which I sort of grew up and like
yeah.
came of age in.
But to be clear, this is, even though it has that, this is a very narrative focused game overall, right? Like this is, you're not going to launch this game up and like suddenly just be treated to a bunch of like eye candy, right? You have to really dig into the game to start, pushing through, the narrative, and then eventually you might get like a scene or two with the character, right?
It's
Um
very different from honestly what I was expecting or my
yeah.
friend was expecting. I think, yeah, it really was kind of a an eye opening experience. I think.
How long were you guys like sitting there playing Pia Carrot in Japanese at that time?
Um,
What did that look like session wise?
yeah. I mean, it is a relatively short game.
Mhm.
I mean, you've gotten to play it. I don't know how you felt like playing through an individual scenario, especially one where you start from the prologue and like maybe get like the sort of the bad ending.
Yeah.
But it's pretty easy to do that, and so that's what we did. Like, you would sit down, be like, all right, let's play through this game, and we're just like going, cycling through Japanese text, Japanese text, Japanese text, get to a choice segment,
Yeah.
randomly pick
And
something.
you guys didn't know any Japanese at that time, right? You just sort of
No, well, I
having a
mean, I guess I had maybe just started taking Japanese lessons.
Mhm.
So it's possible, like, I mean, like in college, so like Japanese 101 or whatever. I might have just started taking a class. And so I did feel like, oh, I should be able to get something out of the Japanese in this, which of course I almost couldn't at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's good practice to try. And but yeah, it's like maybe a 2 or 3 hours to play through, and so we would play through it, get a bad ending, not see anything all that interesting, in terms of maybe what we'd been looking for. And yeah, and then we were just left with a lot of questions like, what is going on in this game, right?
Yeah. And I think one really important thing to note as well is like, I mean, this is like 1990s, right? And so, like, I would say personally, from my experience, this type of genre of game wasn't really accepted by the gaming audience at the very least until probably near 2010, like
Yeah,
around that time. So
and
this
I
was
think we're talking
significantly
about more
before.
of like a Western gaming audience, and that's not to
Oh,
say
yes,
like
yes, yes, yes.
I don't think I don't think we're going into the history really deeply in this episode. But yeah, there had been attempts, throughout the years to kind of like bring more of these games over here and develop a market for them. But I don't think we're seeing that in 1995, right?
Yeah. Me as a Nintendo kid would have no idea these things existed. So, I mean, even the idea of like console adventure games was very rare. It felt like that was a PC
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yep.
And so like and that's not to say they didn't exist on console, just like I didn't really see it in the forefront of like the US game industry very much.
Yeah.
I think an experience like Shenmue was probably one of the first experiences I had in that kind of space on console in like a
Sure.
very direct way. Um, and Shenmue is even its own kind of unique thing because it is like this full 3D thing. You're walking around the world, right? That kind of thing. Um, but I think in a lot of ways, structurally, there's a lot of similarities between Shenmue and adventure games and things like that. It's just how it's presented, in my opinion, personally. so, so yeah. Um, so you had that experience, you played it and you beat it. I mean, like, is this an experience you kept thinking about long term, or is it something that you didn't really think about until years later? What was the post Pia Carrot moment like for you?
Yeah, yeah. I think it always stuck in my mind because I knew that there were multiple characters, that you could sort of get endings for and unlock
Mhm.
CGs for and things like that. And so I was always pretty interested in like what was going on with all these characters, what were their stories, how did you even unlock them? Because I did so I mean, like I said, our experience was pretty much playing through the game several times and getting the bad ending. Right,
Yeah.
one time with one character, I was able to get that character's ending
Mhm.
almost randomly. Knowing almost no Japanese, we didn't have Google Lens to point at the TV and translate the text for us or anything like that. Um, so yeah, it always stuck in my head
Yeah.
quite a lot, which I think is why I ended up coming back to it later, when I felt like maybe time was ripe and I could get somebody to help me fan translate the game. If I had if I had forgotten about it, and just sort of moved on, like I don't think I ever would have pursued that.
Yeah. Was there anything in specific that specifically kind of kicked that off, or was that just like an ongoing thing of like, can I find somebody who's willing to crack open a PCFX and figure this out, or PCFX software?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I was always sort of looking for that opportunity, but
Mm.
after I got interested in hacking and translating video games, basically. So that was sort of a separate thing. But Welcome to Pia Carrot was sort of in the back of my mind, and honestly, that was selfishly for me because I wanted to be able to play it and understand what was going on. I could have sat down with a dictionary and just like tried to play through the game, right? But I felt like it was in some ways a little bit easier for me if I had all the text and I could just translate it at my leisure, and yeah, and then we could share that with other people too. So
The pacing of playing a game while translating even with like machine translations, incredibly slow. And so like doing that with the dictionary, I'm sure is even slower. So like being able to like once you have it, sit down and kind of appreciate it for kind of what the original pacing is, right? So um I think it's interesting that and I think we've kind of established before that you had like a more anime background as a whole, maybe less so videos at the time, so it probably was a lot more familiar to you coming into it. I would expect, right?
yeah, I mean, I would almost actually flip that around a little bit though.
Mhm.
Video gaming kind of got me into anime, and around when Welcome to Pia Carrot was coming out was when I was sort of first like becoming an anime fan, right? I'd sort of
Okay,
seen
gotcha.
my first few shows and thought they were really fun and interesting. And that's kind of one of the reasons my buddy imported the PCFX, I think, because we were both getting into anime and starting to watch it, uh, together.
Yeah,
Stuff we got on VHS, and I think maybe Dragon Ball Z might have started airing sometime around then, or maybe we were just starting to get some things like Sailor Moon or something on US TV.
yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting that that you somehow got to the anime system at the time, like, because I don't think that would be super apparent up front of like this is the console for anime fans. But here we are. We ended up with this kind of thing. But I think we've had conversation before about like how your friend got to the PCFX and you're not quite sure. It just kind of landed in front of you in your situation. So
Yeah, like I said, yeah, he just he's like, hey, I got this system. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
we both thought it was fun.
yeah. I'm glad you're like so open to it because like I think I've told you before, and I don't remember if I brought it up on this show before or not, but like my experience with like these kind of games, like romantic adventure games, I think was in some ways maybe the more usual way people kind of approach this, which is, oh ho ho ho, sexy anime game. I'm gonna play this as a joke. And not it's not Welcome to Pia Carrot. I was playing there's like I used to be a 4chan guy when I was a kid. And there was the 4chan visual novel Katawa Shoujo, which is a very, I would say, very serious visual novel in its approach. It's not like jokey in the way that you would think a 4chan visual novel would be. And it was good. But they put out like a preview episode or whatever, and I was like, I'm gonna play this and gonna have a make fun of it, essentially. And I played it, and at the same time, my friend was playing what is it? The not maybe not Fate, but some Fate related visual novels.
Tsukihime,
Yeah,
maybe.
that thing. He was playing that,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was making fun of him for playing that, and he felt bad about that. Which
Oh
is a
no.
yes. I don't. That's the last time I talked to him, so I feel like I have a lot of regret. This is very young Ben. Anyways, but I played the Katao Shoujo demo, and then I was just like, oh, this is like there's something here, but I didn't know what it was at the time. And so it took me years and years and years of like kind of touching and stopping with these kind of games, trying to understand like kind of what their appeal is. Because when it comes to narrative, I'm somebody who has a lot more. I think I can appreciate narrative, but I need to appreciate the game first a lot of times. And so one thing I was trying to figure out is like when you play a visual novel, perspective wise, things feel very different versus like an anime for me. Um, Not only in the sense of like it's a bit more of like a first person mode, but also I think because of the length of dialogue and the time you can spend in an individual moment. I was talking to a bowl of lentils recently, and I think he said that like when you play a visual novel, you feel very present in the scene in a way that you might not in other media because of how quickly scenes go by. Visual novels have a lot of space to stay in a scene sometimes. Um, but yeah, so it took me a really long time to kind of figure out, what the appeal was for these games. But I do think there is, as easy it is to look at these games, see an anime girl on screen, see text, and be like, oh, that's all it is. Um, I think there is a lot more to these games in terms of how they feel to play at times. Um, I think that's like very true of Welcome to Pia Carrot, although I think maybe my first experience with that might be um First Kiss Story. First Kiss Story I think feels very similar to Welcome to Pia Carrot in terms of structure, but how it's presented is quite a bit different, I feel like. So I feel like part of playing Welcome to Pia Carrot for me was like, in some ways, because I played First Kiss Story in a similar way to you played Welcome to Pia Carrot, where I didn't use machine translation. I just sat down. I was like, I have a baby understanding Japanese. I'm just going to sit down and enjoy this for what it is, and then 100%ed it somehow. Um, like for me, that experience was like very confusing of what was enjoyable at times. And I think a lot of it is the mystery of not knowing what's being said sometimes as well.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but I think that also distracted me from what made the game structurally interesting as well. Because I think I was so enamored by the idea that like I am figuring out what's going on here despite not being able to read any of this
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of thing.
creating the narrative in my head of like what is actually happening, and who knows if that's really what it is or not. Yeah,
Yeah, and like I think First Kiss Story and Welcome to Pia Carrot most of the time are pretty straightforward. They're both high school romance kind of games, right? And some of these things extend outside that. That's not to say that like every character is a high school student, right? There's a bunch of characters that exist outside of it. Welcome to Pia Carrot. You actually don't spend a lot of time at school. It's mostly at a job that you're in. You're working at this cafe called Welcome to Pia Carrot, right? And so there's like a lot of like diversity in like the types of characters you're interacting with, not just a bunch of high school girls per se, kind of thing. Um, I did want to kind of like hone in a little bit on what you talked about earlier with the idea of like you got the bad ending, and then like when you got the good ending, it sounded like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like there's a feeling that you got with that of like some level of satisfaction, right? Um, like is that, would you be able to describe what that feels like to you, or?
Um, I can try. I mean, I think when you don't know Japanese, for instance, I mean, you were saying you were able to like 100% first kiss story,
Mhm.
and I feel like like for me, I had a similar experience with Final Fantasy 13, which
Mhm.
some people would argue is a very linear game, right? So it might lend itself to being played in a language that you don't fully understand. But that was many years later when my grasp of Japanese was a bit better. So I was able to like kind of understand some of most of the stuff that was going on, and then look up things that I was unsure about and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I count that as kind of the first game I've played from start to finish in Japanese, and really felt like I got the same kind of experience out of it that I would have gotten had I played it in English, which was very satisfying for me. So I think playing through Welcome to Pia Carrot and being able to sort out one of the characters' endings was also satisfying in a slightly different way, where it's just like, wow, like I wasn't really able to understand this game, but I was still able to figure out mechanically, or at least stumbled mechanically upon like the path uh, to achieve one of the good endings.
Mm.
Um, and I think because of that, uh, it ignited a lot of curiosity in me. How exactly was I able to get from point A to point B on that character? How can I do it on the other characters? What are the other stories like? Not that I necessarily understood this one, but you at least get an impression. Like you said, it is pretty straightforward, and you sort of fill in the blanks yourself. And who knows, maybe the narrative I made around it was more interesting than what actually happened. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was really cool, and it really made me want to see more.
Yeah.
In like a, how do I put it? Like, not in I want to see more adult scenes way, but like I want to see more of what this narrative has to offer, because
Yeah.
it's a lot more. It was a lot more. Um, it was a lot more interesting than I thought it was. I think you could tell that there was drama happening in the game, and I think that's one of the things that I was curious about the most, is like, why are these characters getting emotional?
Yeah.
Why are they, um, just whatever, being evasive, or, whatever was happening in the game. It really made me want to explore it more.
I like that you focused on the like because I didn't understand Japanese, this was interesting thing, because I feel like playing to Welcome to Pia Carrot in some ways kind of broke that feeling I had with First Kiss Story.
Hmm.
Because I think I felt very similar playing Welcome to Pia Carrot in the same way I played with like with First Kiss Story in a way I wasn't expecting. Because I would think that I wouldn't get as much satisfaction through finishing a character story if I understood everything, right? But I didn't actually realize that's the case. So if you don't know how Welcome to Pia Carrot works, is so essentially kind of the start of the game. Again, you're basically working at this cafe. Essentially, your like dad is like, come work for the summer. I forget why. There's like some vacation thing that you tried to go on and didn't work out. But
You
um,
failed. You failed too many classes in high school, and so your dad was like, I you lost the bet with your dad where he was going to let you like take a trip for summer break, and basically he's like, nope, you
Yeah.
are going to work in my restaurant for summer break. That's what we agreed to. So,
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is like a lot of people from your school, there's two, three girls from your school that end up working there. There's
I
Satomi,
mean,
Shoko, and
two I can think
then
of offhand. I maybe just
Yukiko is
two.
not a part of your school. She's
No,
someone else.
she I think
Okay.
she goes to a different school.
Okay. Yeah. So there's at least two characters from your school, and they're characters that your character has a previous relationship with. They're definitely like childhood friends kind of characters. And then in addition to that, you meet some new girls at the actual cafe. And then from there, there's also characters that kind of are related to the cafe and kind of show up in different ways, but their narratives kind of take place elsewhere, kind of thing. Um, and so when you're playing this game, you kind of have some limited options to kind of move around the world. There's not a lot, and especially compared to something like First Kiss Story, where you have like a whole map in front of you. This is like here's a little menu, it pops up, and it only shows areas typically after you've had some kind of interaction there. So like you can't necessarily just go to this place just because you want to. You have to like find the narrative point in the story that lets you go there, kind of thing. And so what ends up happening is when you're playing the game, you kind of make these decisions of like where you want to go, who you want to talk to, and these start opening up new routes and things throughout the game. And so you can start visiting certain locations, or you can continue to visit a character and get like extended dialogue, or you might be able to call them and have conversations on the phone with them, right? So you're kind of like expanding like your access to tools in a lot of ways. It was like a very weird way to describe a game like this, I feel like, but I think this is like really what's happening here is this like you start at this point and like all these paths start opening up as you kind of explore different parts of the game that start to extend out. And at the end of all these paths, there's a girl, yes, but but like part of the fun of the game, I feel like, is looking at these paths and saying, where can I go and how do I get here, kind of thing, right?
Definitely, yeah, and I think an interesting distinction from modern games is just to like point out that modern games sometimes like literally show you a tree
Yeah,
of different you know options that you can choose. And I think Welcome to Pia Carrot, I feel like it creates a sense of almost like more more freedom than maybe you even actually have. Like it really feels like you can kind of do anything, at least within the confines of the mechanics, because like you said, you can choose to call somebody, and like you literally will just like ring the phone to so and so, and it'll ring and it'll just be like, yep, nobody picked up, they're not there, right?
yeah. You gotta
Or
call
you
either
like,
the morning or the like on your days off. There's like different times of the day or days of the week. You can call on their days when they're working, days when they're not working, that kind of thing, right?
yeah, you can get the option to go to the park, and then you go to the park, there's nobody there, you spent your day at the park. Hope
Honestly,
you had a
the
nice
first time you
afternoon.
play this game, you're gonna get a bad end.
Yeah,
You'd be very surprised. There's some characters that you probably could. I feel like this is true from the games I've played. There's always like a character that, as long as you try, you'll get there.
yeah, yeah.
Like in this game, I feel like it's Shoko. Shoko just kind of throws herself at you, and as long as you're like nice to her, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It
but
feels
a
a
lot.
little mean, but like she's a gimme character.
I mean, she is infatuated with you as a
Yes.
character. She
Yeah.
is like, I love you from the beginning of the game. I love you. I want to be with you, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like she has decided.
Yeah.
So
And I think we
we need
talked about this a
the
little bit.
reverse game where Shoko trying to get the main character and you don't know where he is.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. But I mean it's interesting because I mean that sounds boring, and honestly I think she's kind of like probably both of our somewhat least favorite characters in the game.
yeah,
But it's interesting because she likes you, so some of the conflict is actually sort of in what does that really entail for her,
yeah.
right?
And even when you are like going after other girls, I don't necessarily know how much this plays a role, but like if you cheat, treat Shoko, cheat maybe slip there, treat Shoko poorly, you might get some like I think it's called notoriety or something like that, or infamous or something like that. You get basically a bad stat that says you did something bad. I don't know how other characters relate to that really. I never had a situation where like it was very apparent that that was like what caused me to not get something. Um,
There's definitely a threshold beyond which your notoriety cannot progress in order to get the endings for some or all of the characters.
so part of it is like also how do you let Shoko down the best way, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So you're not like
If you're
making everybody
pursuing one
into,
of the other girls, yeah.
yeah, if you're pursuing one of the other girls, yeah. So, but like that's kind of the fun of the game, I think, in a lot of ways, is that like you mentioned that like there's not a lot of guidance basically. And I mean, I think this is true for a lot of modern games. I think a lot of modern games really just want to kind of, I don't know if respect your time is the right word, but they want you to get to that feeling of reward faster. And I think with older games, a lot of times they're willing to let you suffer and maybe not necessarily get to some level of success, right? So, welcome to Pia Carrot, you can get to a bad ending, and it's like the game doesn't really mind that. But I think what the intention is that you're supposed to do is like, okay, I got the bad ending. What information do I have? And when I first played this, and I would really encourage anybody who plays Welcome to Pia Carrot not to go straight to a guide, is just start taking notes, right? Because you have multiple stats in the game and you can basically choose, you know, do I want to study? Do I want to like work this type of job, which might build my conversational skills and things like that, right? And part of this game is hunting to figure out where the stats are too. How can I get more fashion or whatever it's called, appearance or whatever? How can I get more conversational skills? But it's also about understanding like what people want, right? So and the game will never tell you, or very rarely will tell you this character wants this. But there are
Only if you
things,
pay Rumi $10.
well, yes, your little sister comes up in your room some nights and is like, this person likes this. But I feel like even when I was paying her like every time for a long time, she only tells you so much. I
Yeah,
feel like
it's marginally helpful.
yeah, yeah. And so I think one thing that I really noticed is like there's sometimes you just have to really pay attention to dialogue. So like there's a character called I think it's Shiho. She's like the manager or like the assistant manager of the cafe. And one thing they do tell you up front is that like she loves guys who are determined. So to do that, you have to go and like wash dishes because that levels your determination. But the thing that I missed, because I was like looking around for other pieces of information, I couldn't find anything, is that she also cares immensely about appearance. She wants you to be cleaned up. And in playing the game again after I failed to court her, right? Um, it was like in one of the opening scenes, she talks about how important your appearance is and stuff like that. And I think in my head, I just kind of wrote it away as like she's the boss talking about your appearance. But it could be that they're trying to convey to you that, like, no, she cares about your appearance is actually kept up, basically. So like just trying to find those little notes, and it's just not very clear, but that's like I think kind of part of the appeal of the game is like having to dig into this further. And the question is like, you know, does the game communicate it well or not is kind of another thing. But you know, I think those are very important parts of Pia Carrot to me. Of
Definitely, yeah. I mean, and I definitely agree with you too. Like, I would encourage people to kind of focus on trying to pick up on the cues and play through the game at least a couple, times without
yeah.
using any kind of a guide. I do feel like it might be a little tedious to try to do that for every route if you wanted to like fully complete the game, but
Mhm.
I think you could have a lot of fun unlocking, you know, even 3, 4, 5 routes like that before you start running into some things that are like maybe just a touch more obscure and opaque as to how you actually like progress.
I tend to find like certain characters in these types. I mean, maybe I'm mostly using First Kiss Story as a point of comparison. There are a set of characters that kind of exist outside the realm of the main narrative that tend to require a very specific way to get on their path, and then also require a very specific set of actions afterwards for you to kind of keep up with them. And those characters, in the same case with El Pia Carrot, I think I got like 4 endings. And, you know, I got the endings with pretty much the primary girls, Satomi, Shoko, um, Yukiko, kind of the characters that are like in that cafe directly. Um, that's easy enough because I think you have a lot of information about them. You have their work schedules at some point. I think you don't get it until after your first playthrough, basically. Or I think it's like at the end of one of the playthroughs, you find a crumpled up piece of paper with all their schedules. And it's consistent throughout it. So it's just something you bring into your next playthrough, right? and you're like, okay, well, now I know that this is the day I can call this person and they might pick up or might be able to go do something. Um, but as you do all these things, I think you'll start seeing those little paths kind of show up, and especially if you're trying to specifically go for a character, um I think they're like little paths that you'll note that you have to kind of like keep in background, like, oh, this seems like an opportunity to get with like Kiyomi, who's like your teacher or whatever, um and or your homeroom teacher. I don't remember what role she plays. Like, here's the opportunity for that, but this is not what my goal is right now, so I'm just going to wait until later to kind of get back to this. And mapping it out in your head, I think, is for me the fun of it, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think picking up a guide at some point, there's a few characters that, like, it feels like you're doing something wrong when you are playing through their arc. Like, there's this girl named Saori, the green hair girl,
Yes.
and
So
a lot of her arc is doing nothing. And so you're like sitting there like, I can't find where to interact with her. I can't do anything. And that just seems to be the case with her. She's just not very around. So it's a lot of just you. If you go look at the guide just says like sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep, work. And then eventually there's like one day you go do something. So there's some characters that I think are just a lot less directly integrated into what the game is doing. And they feel more like almost, I don't want to say Easter eggs, but kind of like
mm,
the advanced game section.
yeah, they are
So
almost like bonus characters. Or,
yeah,
yeah.
there is a character that is almost entirely a bonus character. I found out,
Yes.
is like, I don't know how to describe her. I don't know how in deep you want to get with her, but it's like you do one thing over and over and over again, and she just like shows up and just says hi and then bye. And then you eventually get to some point in the story with her, and it's kind of like weird because it's like so little happens. It's very clearly like an afterthought character of like, I guess we could put this character in. It feels like they made a character and couldn't figure out like have the time to put like her full story in, so they just did this little like fun little side thing and like
That
kind
could
of
be.
played into some of her faults. This is made up. This is video game fan fiction right now. But or video game development fan fiction is what I call it. But it just kind of feel like that. Of just like this character maybe just didn't get the, or seem to not have gotten the attention of the other characters when it comes to making the video game. I mean, this is originally a PC 98 game, so I don't know. Did they add characters at all for this game at all, or is that? Um,
That's a great question. I feel like I should know definitively. I don't think they did, because I feel like it's well known that they added a character for the Saturn port. I
mm,
do not believe the PCFX port has any added characters. I think what it has is added uh, FMV, just a couple, like an intro and an outro, and
yeah, I don't think there's any FMV in the game itself.
yeah, and the voice acting. But I think because of that, they kept the characters and everything the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking into it recently because I was looking at the different openings for all the Welcome to Pia Carrot games, because I have this whole thing of like, how do you sell what a visual novel is to people? And it's a question I ask all the time. And I'm trying to better understand that for myself. So I was trying to like see like, how does Welcome to Pia Carrot represent itself?
Did you got to hear "Go Go Waitress"?
Go Go Waitress.
Yeah, it's like the theme song that they play in the opening for the second game.
Oh yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, yeah,
That is the trailer I like the most out of all the Welcome to Pia Carrot games.
yeah. It's very
That is a
it's
fun,
catchy and
fun
fun.
opening or whatever. And I like that they integrate certain elements of gameplay into that as well. That's kind of another thing. Um, but yeah, like the first game, it doesn't really have any opening on the PC 98. You just kind of end up on the title screen, and there's the little characters on screen, little chibi versions of the characters hanging out there. But the PCFX one has like, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like an advertisement for the PCFX game initially. I don't know what it's saying, but like they specifically call out the PCFX in the opening, and then it plays the actual opening afterwards. It's kind of cute.
That's a
Um,
good point. I wouldn't be surprised if it served double duty as a television ad, or something that could play at a game store or something at the time. I mean, I guess maybe just as an attract screen if they had the game running or something too. Maybe.
they really go, and this might be true for multiple PCFX games. I'm not sure. They really stuff that attract screen section of the game. I don't know if you ever sat down and like watched the whole thing. It is very long.
Yeah, well, I think it shows the prologue video and stuff too if you just let it run.
So not quite. So there's two different things. One is that there's the character profiles where the characters introduce themselves, which updates over the course of you playing the game, where it'll add characters. So
Oh, interesting.
if you finish like dating Saori, who's like not a part of the main narrative, she's not a part of that initially, but then she gets put in later, and it's like, hey, I like swimming, and that's a big part of her story about swimming stuff, kind of thing, kind of related to some other stuff, like some trauma, essentially. Um, and so like that gets integrated in there. But another thing is that they do different opening videos. So one is like a creditless version of the opening video, so there's no credits on screen. The other one is one that integrates different types of full motion video scenes that I don't think are like in the normal opening. I'd have to go back and look at it. Sorry, I wasn't like thinking about talking about this on the show. This was just something
Sure,
I
sure.
looked at, and I was sitting there just being like, this is really long. And then also they have uh versions of the opening without the lyrics as well. So like if you sit down, you will be treated to like four different versions of the attract screen. And it's just a lot.
Nice, nice. That's
So
cool. I don't know that I've even ever just let it run that long.
yeah, I was just again trying to figure out like how the games sell themselves. I was like, oh, maybe there's a different video. And I was thinking of just like play the opening video, but no, it goes into a bunch of other stuff. And it's a lot of reused assets. So I'm not saying it's like every single video is very different, but it's like four different combinations. Which I thought was interesting. So but one thing I wanted to kind of like emphasize when talking about like the gameplay aspect of this game is that I think there is like a real exploration feel to this game. This is an exploration game to me. Um which is a weird thing to say about a visual novel where you just click through and select options, but it because of how I perceive it, I think First Kiss Story is the same way. It is about being able to explore this world, and in some ways, I think in a more traditional video game, it's like where in the environment can I show up at, and like what different things can I find in the environment. But I think in the case of Welcome to Pia Carrot, it is like what part of the narrative I'm going to stumble into. What am I going to find here if I call at this time? What will I find here? Kind of thing. And so I think that's like something I really want to emphasize, that like if you haven't played a game like this before, there is definitely a like mechanical feeling that I think is satisfying, because at the end of the day, when you do finally get that character ending, like earning it on your own, um, I think that is a very satisfying feeling, especially if you've like gotten the bad ending three times in a row. As frustrating as it can be, right? Like, I think sometimes like the more pain you go through, the better the result can feel on the other side. And I think a lot of times people talk about like things like the I don't want to get too into it, but like shortened dopamine cycles and things like that. I feel like a lot of games are like trying to reward you more often now. And in some ways, I feel like with Welcome to Pia Carrot, it feels like you're earning that reward in a way that I feel like a lot of modern games I don't get that feeling from. I'm playing Amagami right now, which has like this whole board game aspect to it where you can kind of like see where all the girls are and events are at a time. And sometimes, as much as it's like good to know what you're missing, um, it can be overwhelming. And I also think it can feel like I am missing something. Where in the case of like Pia Carrot, sometimes I don't know I'm missing something. And it's like kind of better I don't know. I kind of would rather not know that I missed a scene sometimes. I'm just like, I just got the ending. I'm good. Although one thing that does kind of come into like visual novels and things like that is like there's a CG gallery where you can view like the full screen art and things like that. And that can act as a guide for like how to find certain things. Like, oh, here's a section of the game that happens between when this scene happens and this scene happens that I missed something. Um
Yeah, those are definitely really instructional. Although if you're kind of a, completionist who's really pedantic, it is a little frustrating because this game does separate out its CGs by the uniform that the girls are wearing, and
yeah.
so there are literally like for each scene that happens with a girl who's in the uniform at the restaurant, there are three different uniforms. So there will be three different versions of the CG that you would technically have to unlock if you wanted to have a complete, like a fully unlocked character.
There's actually, yeah, the thing we didn't talk about is like at the start of the game, you actually choose what the outfit of the Pia Carrot restaurant is. which is kind of interesting because like narratively, there's a lot of things of characters being like, I thought the outfit was cute, that's why I want to work here. Um, so it's kind of fun that you get to like choose the outfit that they all were excited to come wear for some reason. so, um, so yeah,
That's
but yeah, it does kind of stink that like instead of just being like one CG with different things you can flip through, it is counts as its own scene. So it's like just you gotta date a girl 3 times, and the only difference is what outfit they're wearing during
right,
those
right.
scenes.
It kind of got me thinking. Like, I'm surprised that there haven't been, I don't know, romantic adventure games or something like that where you get to, you know, build outfits like you're doing an Armored Core mech or something like that. Like, just, completely customize the character's looks or something. That's seems like that would be kind of fun.
I'd be curious. I feel like that probably should exist. There's something that like, and I don't want to get too much into Ben's zone here. You know me, I'll go on any topic tangent that you'll let me go on. But I've been playing a DS game called Imagine Makeup Artist,
Okay.
and it is strange how similar those games feel to games like Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Mhm.
There's a lot of very similar values. The audience is very different, and so part of that game is that you are a girl working on a makeup artist, and then so you need to go date the guys around town and stuff sometimes, or you don't need to. You can if you want to. So you can actually dress yourself up. And so like a guy was like, "Oh, let's go on a date." And I was like, "Sure." And I dressed my character up, and he showed up in like a hoodie. And I'm like in this like very nice looking dress, and I'm like, "Gosh dang it, I overdressed for this date." But I feel like there's probably something there. I would be surprised if you know of any fashion like romantic adventure games. I That's my kind of thing. So
Let
anyone in
us
the
know.
world out there, let me know. I'm desperate. Um, bring it to me because that's like the ultimate crossover of what I look at. I love fashion games, so that's kind of a big part of my interest. So despite not wearing any fashionable things, so yeah, but it is nice. It's like a really nice touch, I think. Generally, I don't know if that was a part of the PC 98 version or not, but it only really affects like the character portraits and some like the handful of CG scenes where they're like wearing those outfits and things like that too. So, um, I think gameplay wise though, I think that's kind of the point. Is I just wanted to like really emphasize like what I felt playing Welcome to Pia Carrot, because I think at the end of the day that is what I felt playing First Kiss Story. But I just was so probably distracted by the fact that I didn't understand what was going on, that I maybe misattributed some of that to just the fact I couldn't read it. Of just like, oh, I'm also figuring out the story, so that's part of the satisfaction. But I think part of it's also, where is this person at what time? How do I find them? And like what little hints do I find about around the world to understand where these other characters are located at certain times? So like when I go to actually go down their route, I can use that information to kind of figure out what how to map out their section of the path essentially. So
Yeah,
um
I mean, I call these games romantic adventure games, right? And I think I typically apply that even to games that you might call like a visual novels. And I think there are pros and cons to sort of both, um, you know, terms, but I think that this game in particular, it does really, it kind of feels like those, I guess you have, going way back, sort of that Portopia serial murder case, right? These adventure games that are like mystery based murder mysteries, supernatural mysteries, and things like that. Uh, I think structurally, this maybe game in particular, and a number of games, in this genre aren't too dissimilar from those games where you just replace uh, investigating a murder mystery to engaging in a romance story.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really think about it. I mean, I guess you probably don't end up at different dead people in an investigation thing.
I mean, that probably depends on the romantic adventure game.
So, but yeah, I think I just really want to emphasize there's more here than just like talking to girls directly. I mean, that is the core of it. But I think sometimes that can get really overlooked by, seeing a screenshot with an anime girl on screen. So But it's hard because visual novels, I think, I mean, kind of going back to like how do you sell a visual novel that I was kind of mentioning earlier, like it's hard to tell what a visual novel is trying to do until you like, or sorry, using the term visual novel broadly here. But it's kind of hard to tell what something's trying to do until you kind of see how it works. And it's not something that you can easily like drop in a trailer, I feel like sometimes. Um, Part of me in my brain, part of the reason I was like looking at all the Welcome to Pia Carrot things was like, if I made a trailer for Welcome to Pia Carrot for the PCFX, what would I highlight and how? And what would I want to communicate to somebody? Um, because I do get so frustrated with like watching trailers for games like this, and all it does is show the characters, and that's fine. And the characters are the draw, to be clear. For most people, that is what you see a cute girl and like you saw cute girls and it's slightly spicy and you want to check it out. And for me, that's like not necessarily how this works a lot of times. Is it is for me, it's like I want to see how your game is functions and how it's structured. And so I would love to be able to communicate that in like a very short form way to people.
I think you would be
But
reading the Nintendo power of, you know, PC 98 visual novel games, and you know, getting into the nitty gritty of
maybe
the game mechanics.
Maybe. When it comes to visual novel trailers, like knowing what to show on screen, how and how to present it, I think is like a really challenging thing that I would love to better understand. But I feel like I don't understand it still. So, but hopefully that paints a good picture if you're somebody who's been on the fence about checking out Welcome to Pia Carrot. But obviously, mechanics aside, this game is a narrative focused game, although I'd say lighter than I expected. I don't know if you would agree with me in this sense that like this game feels like it doesn't have, I mean, it's a lot of text, don't get me wrong, but it feels like it is not as dense as other games I've played in this kind of space where it feels like a lot of what you're getting are these individual moments with characters. And I feel like a lot of times it feels like you're kind of filling in the gaps in your own head of like what's happening narratively here. Um, like some characters feel like you kind of jump from one scene where you're not really romantically engaged with them and suddenly you very much have a romantic engagement with them. And it feels like it's not that that is like a like if you fill in that gap with just like generally working together at this cafe and stuff like that, you know, these there's maybe moments you can think of that like just don't exist in the game, I feel like. But to me, it's like if you mentally fill in those gaps, it works. Um,
I feel that way as well, and you know, my honestly, my library of sort of games to compare it to is relatively limited. I actually don't play as many of these games as you might think. Um, so I'm thinking of a game like Tsukihime, where like the narrative on that is pretty interesting, and it feels like a bit more fleshed out. Whereas I think with Welcome to Pia Carrot, I get the impression of it's like the idea that you have these brief moments, right? It's like if you're in high school and it's your summer break, and it's like it's such a short period of time, and you have like the opportunities to interact with a lot of people, and a lot of like single eligible people and things like that, right? But it's like, can you make that special moment happen on that? Maybe it could be that only opportunity that you have to like get closer to this girl that you like, and sort of like get that connection that you
yeah.
that you really need.
I
And
mean, the game kind of in a lot of ways is like make the most of your summer vacation kind of
yeah.
thing. I think it's kind of the way it's presented, despite you working during it. But
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I feel like the game does kind of like say does push it as like I mean, there's this kind of moment at the end of every playthrough, which is I think it's like a month is like how long your time at Pia Carrot is. But like when you finish your last day, you get outside of the building, and you kind of reminisce around about your time and how you spent your summer a little bit.
yeah,
And part of that is supposed to kind of tell you who your best relationship is with. And they're pretty blunt with it. They're kind of like, they have a very straightforward line of like, oh, this person kind of thing. To kind of hint to you like who you should call afterwards because they're the best bet for you to get a girlfriend at this point. um, but it does feel like it is very like, hey, how did you spend your time? And then that's going to have a big impact on where you go in the future. Basically, this 1 month period is going to kind of decide who you spend time with, who you potentially marry. I don't know. I don't think any character. It's not like First Kiss Story has a lot of like you went and married this person. I don't think Welcome to PK really has anything like that. I think it is very much just like here's you guys doing something afterwards kind of thing.
Yeah, you
Being
get sort of
together.
nice little I don't know post logs, but it's not like it's not wedding bells.
Yeah, First Kiss Story is very much wedding bells.
Yeah,
So, um, but yeah, it's tonally. I think it's a very like I think charming game in a lot of ways.
yeah. I
There are
think
some. Oh, god.
I was just gonna say like a lot of the stuff is surprisingly mundane too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it really is just sort of about like regular life. Um, and even too, it's like a lot of the things like you get a chance to go on a family vacation. Your sister will invite you to like go to the fair, right? The
Mm-hmm.
festival and stuff like that. I feel like it's interesting how characters like your father and your sister are actually really present in the game. And just sort of your everyday life too. It's not just sort of like this really unrealistic like dating girls wish fulfillment thing. Which I think I mean, it might depend on like the games that you play, but I haven't played other games that really have the feeling of Welcome to Pia Carrot for me. I don't think.
It might depend because I feel like in some ways that is like a part of the appeal of a lot of like games that are based around like Japanese anime kind of stuff. I feel like what is I'm not saying this is not true for Western games, just to be clear, but I feel like it's more present. I feel like a lot of times there's a lot more down moments in Japanese games where down in the sense of like nothing super crazy is happening. You're just here hanging out. Um, I'm going through like a ton of examples in my head, but I don't want to get off topic here. But
Well,
there's
I'm
a
thinking like the director's cut of the movie that like allows the characters to have scenes that aren't all like super important and tightly cut and moving the plot forward. Like where it's
yeah,
like you can have
yeah.
a little more of those. Yeah, just like
Yeah, there's just a
spending
lot
time
of
with the
games where
character.
like there's like a cafe and you can go and there's a character you can kind of like talk to there and they might have something going on, but it's not really relevant to the plot per se. Or you might solve somebody's problem and you like the Yakuza games have like slot car racing and things like that, right? Where you can go and play like these toy cars and build your toy cars. Obviously, some crazy narratives happening over there with a guy cutting fingers off, right? But you're like, I'm gonna play slot cars today. Woo, woo, woo. And there's like a story around it. It's like how like a son and the dad bond and things like that. I have actually played that game, so I'm assuming a lot, or from what I've heard, in that case. But I thought that might be like a good example of like just the extremities of like how chill a game can be, and then also how intense it can be. I feel like a lot more Western games are more tonally directed, where I feel like Japanese games feel like they often have a wider scope. I don't think anything in Pia Carrot is necessarily like hardcore. There's definitely scenes of drama for sure. But I don't feel like there's anything really outside the realm of just like somebody who had some kind of experience either with you as a character or with someone else that is kind of driving the way they kind of romantically interact with you, right? Like here's a character and some I think probably the more dramatic characters are ones that have previously had some relationship, and that kind of impacts how they interact with you, if that makes sense. um I think about characters like Reika, where she is kind of using you to kind of like heal after her previous relationship kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
um and then we talked about Yukiko earlier, and she has like this ongoing relationship with this guy who's just kind of an asshole, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so and having to deal with that and like how that impacts how she kind of navigates the rest of the world is kind of part of what the narrative is with her.
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the things I really like about the game is that you can interact with the characters on a superficial level, right?
mhm,
So like Yukiko or something like that. Like you can play through the game and end up with a bad ending or end up with other characters' endings or something like that, and you still like encounter her and interact with her a bunch, but like you don't get a chance to learn about her sort of backstory until you kind of like get into that where you're unlocking scenes with her and you're finding out more about her. And it's fun to think about how like all of that is still happening with her when you're not um, seeing it and experiencing it in the game. And I think that's one of the cool things about it is all of the characters, they have something going on,
Yeah.
right? um something of some sort.
And that story exists despite whatever you do, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
it, no matter what route you take, the Yukiko's like jerk of a boyfriend shows up at some point.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's
Yeah.
going on with him,
Yep.
but he's a jerk to you, or in some
Yeah.
cases, he's actually kind of nice to you,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah.
interaction you have with him.
Yeah.
So he's like a weirdly he's an interesting character because depending on how you interacted with him earlier, it can change how you perceive him a little bit. Um, but and then when you go through Yukiko's story, that's when you kind of figure out what's going on with him and all that stuff. And in some ways, like the main girl, Satomi, she has kind of like this secretive hobby she's not telling you about. And so she's like going off doing stuff. You'll see her with your friend sometimes, and I think it's presented as like a "is she dating my friend" kind of thing. And like the fun thing is it's nothing crazy, but it's just like it's just kind of the hidden thing, and isn't until you build trust with Satomi because I think her whole thing is that like you tease her too much is kind of I feel like kind of the deal with her initially. And so once she kind of builds trust with you to kind of wrap you into what's going on with her hobby, she'll kind of let you there's this kind of whole scene of like you going over and like engaging this hobby with her and stuff like that. So which it's interesting to Satomi because I feel like she's kind of like the most like bland character in a lot of ways. She's the main girl. She's just kind of like I don't there's not a lot that stands out about her. But I think the fun
Yeah.
thing with her is that once it's more about like once you get kind of past that wall, it's more about I think sharing an experience with somebody. I think is kind of what her story feels like to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And some of these stories are, I think, pretty interesting too, just in sort of like what the themes are more than
mhm.
maybe like what actually happens or the characters themselves even. Cause like, um, I feel like it was unclear to me for quite a while, but there's a little scene um, where like Satomi is she's talking to you as the character, and like that was a little unclear to me at first. And she's like, yeah, the two of us. She's like, I'm sorry, like it's kind of the implication is like it just isn't going to work, right? She's looking kind of wistfully on the roof of the school at sunset or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And it's like so part of what you're establishing is that like you actually asked her out at one point and were rejected, right? And with her I think the theme is really like how do you go from friends to lovers, like how do you, yeah, especially what like, and just that can be complicated, like I think there are some complicated things around that. uh,
I think they try to add some complication with every character to some
yeah.
extent. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the story. Like, I mean, part of the thing is that like I have this problem sometimes where sometimes I will explain a story to somebody and be like, I really enjoyed it. And it's hard to know what actually was the thing that made it so impactful. Cause I feel like I'll explain, oh, this is like how do you go to friends from lovers or from friends to lovers. But then it's also like, well, there's a lot of stories about that, right? Um, and then it's like, well, how does this game why does this game resonate with you in that way, right? I think sometimes people just kind of say, well, it was like the first time I experienced that story, but I think it's completely valid, right? I've had games before where I'm like, this is the first time I've seen this kind of story. But then when I actually sit down and look around, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of games with this kind of story. I just hadn't really engaged with it before. But I think part of it, and maybe this is like kind of going back to like the being more present in the scene kind of thing. I do feel like with visual novels, you feel a bit closer to what those interactions are. Because in some ways, I feel like with like an anime, you're watching two different characters kind of work it out. But in the case of a visual novel, there's like this weird thing where like the main character in a lot of ways is you, but they are also their own character at the same time. So
Yeah, you're
it's
kind
like
of
you get
taking on
like
a role.
closer, but you don't quite get in there because you're not just like a well, you can name yourself whatever you want, but obviously it's not completely freedom. Like your character has a personality. One thing that frustrates me all the time in these kind of games is that you're playing a high school boy that's like horny, and then they'll sit there and be like, oh, this lady has the sexiest legs while they're like talking to in their mind. And like to me, that's just not how my brain functions. I think I've told you before. I don't remember if I've mentioned on the show. Like I would say I'm asexual, so like those kind of thoughts don't really resonate with me. And so sitting down and reading somebody who is in some way supposed to represent me be like, oh, she's got some nice legs. I'm like, I don't like what's happening. Being forced to have sexy thoughts about this lady in some ways. And I think in some ways I'm kind of like, just show me the lady's legs if you want me to think it's sexy. You don't need to tell me that her legs are sexy while you're showing it on screen. So, but
Yeah, I guess in a way it does help you get into the mindset of the character, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think the big thing is just like the dialogue. I think feels closer to you in some ways. Like it's kind of a positive and negative for me. Where like if a character is doing something I wouldn't say would represent myself, it feels very awkward,
yeah,
or like within the bounds of what I would consider acceptable to some
sure,
extent, right?
sure.
Um, because like mentally, yeah, that's not quite how I think about things in that regard. So, um, I would be curious to know because there are how many girls are in this game? Six
I think
to
it's eight,
eight,
maybe.
eight total.
Yeah,
Um, what characters resonated with you the most, and why do you think they specifically stuck out to you?
yeah. So I think for me, uh,
With the
I think
understanding that some people in the audience might not know who these characters are, so just making sure.
sure.
I know we've talked about Satomi and Yukiko. Yukiko, is that her name?
That's her name. Yeah.
Okay, I in my brain I was thinking of someone in First Kiss Story. All of a sudden, I was like, is that her name or is that a
It,
different character?
it kind of blends together. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, the standout characters are probably Yukiko and Reika. And I don't know. I feel like Yukiko is just maybe in some ways a more relatable character, right?
yeah,
I think we talked about this a little bit before the show. Like she's trying not to spoil things. Like she's kind of the nerdy character, right?
yeah.
And there, I think, are some really interesting things around her personality in terms of like, her working at Pia Carrot and her like, her kind of a hole boyfriend and things like that.
She kind of
Um,
presents like she kind of, I would say, presents herself in different ways depending on the crowd she's with. It seems
yeah,
like
yep,
she very much is like, I'm going to do this because it's going to let me be accepted in this way, and not necessarily being true to herself in those situations.
yeah, yep. That's a lot of what her story is about. And it's just really interesting. I just really like that story route. Right, it's pretty satisfying. Additionally, too, I feel like Reika is interesting. It does make me want to ask: have you gotten around to watching that Speedy Noel video?
I did not watch the Speaking of video yet.
Okay,
Sorry. I played Reika's story.
not to
I
put
would
you on the spot.
say Reika. I know you were saying that like Reika's really good. It didn't really resonate with me very well, and
It's going to be different for yeah,
I felt like it was a story that it could, if you've been. I feel like I'm making a lot of assumptions, so don't they take this as me like painting a picture on you or Speedy Noel or anything like that. It feels like something that like if you've had a emotional pain before that left something that felt like a hole in yourself, it would be a very relatable story.
sure,
Um, and I think in some ways I've had those experiences in the past, but like I said earlier, like I would say I am more like asexual in terms of how I see things. If you don't know, is just basically I don't feel very romantic feelings for people in general. It's just kind of how I am. Um, and so like I feel like it's hard for me to resonate with her story of like how do I fill this hole in me.
sure,
Um,
yeah, because she is, I would say, kind of the opposite of that, where it's like she's kind of one of those people, one of those characters who's just like needs to be dating someone
yeah,
all the time, kind of. Yeah,
which I know people in my life who are like that for sure. So I
yeah,
definitely think that's a very realistic story.
yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, but I find her story interesting too. I think just because like she's also in terms of a character, like if you want Welcome to Pia Carrot to be something that's a more adult story with a lot of like love scenes and stuff in it, right?
Yeah,
Like
if you play her arc, it is like every night she's got you in bed. So
yes, she is extremely forward
yeah,
and very much into that. So so it's interesting because like in some ways I almost feel like the game in some ways is kind of like making fun of you for approaching the game like that in a way too, though, because it's
yeah.
like they're like, oh, like you're gonna go for the easy character who's like, and I think maybe it's not giving her enough credit to necessarily to describe her like that. You also get interesting scenes with her. She's also very interested in appearance. You guys go clothes shopping. There's comedy around that and things like that. But ultimately, like I feel like her story, it has a little bit of depth to it. I think just because like it really sort of turns on its head what you might think if you haven't played the game before, that is just like, oh, this is sort of like this fun character route, and it has some real interesting drama to it, I think, and it has a satisfying conclusion. So
Maybe in the same way that like Shoko is probably the easiest character to go date and like emotionally connect with, or maybe
yeah,
not emotionally connect with, like actually establish a relationship with.
yeah,
Reika is appears to be the way to go if you want very quick sexual relationships.
yeah.
And then yes, it kind of turns it on its head and just like, hey, you thought you were here for sexy times. Guess what?
Guess what? Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
she's on a park bench crying.
yeah, yeah,
So, or park swing set or whatever is what she's on.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think Yukiko is probably still my favorite out of all those as well. I think I told you before, I kind of resonate with characters that have like weird interests. And I feel like out of all the characters in the game, she has just like some interesting things going on with her. I get really like I typically when I play games like this, I kind of like move towards those characters, and I think even in person, like if you have a weird thing you're interested or you work on weird things, I am like, let me nose in, let me see what's going on in there. What are you doing? Kind of thing. When I played Love Plus on the DS, like there's a character called Manaka, and once you kind of build relationship with those characters, you can walk home with them. And like the first conversation she had was like, I love sumo wrestling, and I'm like, yeah, you do love sumo wrestling, tell me all about
Nice.
it. So not that there's any depth there, it's just the like in the same ways you kind of fill in the blanks of like what this character's interest levels are, right? Like you don't learn that much about Yukiko, but you learn enough is what I feel
Yeah,
like it kind of
yeah,
feels like. So I would say from there though, like I think Satomi generally. I think as I generally like really well-rounded characters as a whole as well. So Satomi, I think generally out of all the characters in the game, feels like she just has a really good head on her shoulders. She maybe has. I mean, obviously she has the drama with you that we talked about before, with like her, initially kind of not accepting you. But it feels like out of all the characters, like if you dated anybody else, she'd be perfectly fine going on with her life in some ways, kind of thing. Like she doesn't seem that invested, which I kind of appreciate that as well.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I would be curious though, because like as I said earlier, like I don't have like very strong romantic feelings towards people in real life. So this may be a general question about these kind of games as a whole. It's like, do you when you play a game like this, when you're younger or whatever, do you ever feel like romantic feelings towards these characters at all? Or is it more of just I enjoy this character and let me enjoy their story kind of thing?
yeah. That's a really good question. I think it's more of the latter.
Hmm.
Um, for me, and we could maybe get into too, like my own sort of thing, because it's like I feel like I kind of struggle with relationships myself too, sort of like romantic relationships,
Hmm.
just because I feel like um, I don't know if it's like a similar thing, but I guess one of the things that I find really attractive about these kind of games, and again, not that I play a lot of them, but something I really enjoyed about Welcome to Pia Carrot, is the ability to be able to kind of play these scenarios out right
Mhm.
in a like a safe space where it's like I'm not going to be misunderstood, no one is going to misunderstand me. I mean, and obviously in terms of the narrative things like that can happen, but it's because you chose whatever a stupid option or because it was part of the story or
You're not gonna
whatever.
go cry in bed because you got a bad ending in Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Exactly, yeah. So like it really lets you at least in like a story, a narrative way, right? And I've described to before, like let's say Tsukihime, I've called it like the um like Twilight for guys, right? And like
That is a fascinating comparison, but I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yep. So I because you it's enjoyable. People like a romance, even if it's like I don't know, an edgy, goofy, vampire high school girl romance. It's like people enjoy. My mom liked those books, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think stuff like Walking to Pia Carrot is similar. You get to you get to just like live vicariously through these characters a little bit, and I think it helps me like um, just I don't know, just sort of like enjoy like trying to put myself in the place of these characters and just sort of like appreciate like how these relationships would feel, right? I think
Yeah.
there's definitely something to be gained from that, even if it's just kind of like a level of entertainment, right?
Yeah, that's not something I really thought about before, like, the idea that this is, like, some ways, when I play games like Imagine Makeup Artist,
Hmm.
I am trying to understand something in the world that is in a very non-serious way. I don't really wanna get into makeup, but if I play a video game with makeup in it, it's kind of fun, right? And I can learn something about it, hopefully, depending on how the game represents it, right? And like the idea of like understanding different types of relationships more is not something that I really thought too much about with this kind of thing. But I think it makes a lot of sense. And like, especially as somebody who does not engage with relationships very much, because I just don't really have much interest in most of those things, like being able to kind of see like what are the emotions somebody else goes through in these moments. And in some ways it feels kind of, I think to some degree these are all fictional relationships, so I'm not saying that like this is the real one, but understanding like what people value in those things, because like I think one thing that ends up happening with these kind of things, I think, is like I was talking a little bit before the show about sometimes I'll see like dating games for women, so otome games where you'll date a guy, and one of the guys will be some weird creepo who's just like, I will keep you chained up my whole life, my dear, kind of thing, right? He'll say some really weird line
The
that's like incredibly
dangerous, like
controlling and bizarre. And
yeah,
then I'll see like somebody on Twitter post him like, "Oh, my daddy," kind of thing, right? and and it's like, so I played Buddy Mission Bond, which is by the Angelique people. And like one of the characters in that game is very much that kind of thing where he is like his whole gimmick is he's a manipulator. He's going to manipulate everybody around him to get what he wants, basically.
interesting,
Um,
yeah,
and initially when I see that, I'm just like, ooh, I don't like that. But as you kind of like build the understanding of who they are as a person and kind of the pain they've gone through and stuff that kind of brought them to that point, it creates this very like safe narrative about somebody who went through a lot of struggle and is like struggling to basically be a human. And it creates a lot of like sympathy and stuff. But like there's things about it that I think you can kind of appreciate that is safe from actually having to have the fear of being in a relationship with this person, right? And so there's like some nice things about that you can kind of pull out of it, of just like, oh, he's gonna be very protective of me, kind of thing, right? And I think sometimes with games like this, it's kind of nice to be like, here's this relationship, that type of relationship I would never be in. But let me kind of see like what people value in these types of relationships and kind of pull out what they think, and like with that kind of thing. Or in the case of like, a game when you're directly engaging with it, maybe feeling like you're directly engaging with that type of relationship in some ways. but in a very safe way, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean,
think
fiction in
there's
general is like a safe way to explore a lot of ideas, I think, generally. So,
yeah, there's an idea of catharsis, right? Which I think is, maybe I'm not using it correctly in this context, but it's like I think sort of working through like a conflict or feeling or something like that, reaching some kind of resolution, and like I think it's interesting to be able to do that in these ways that that we might not do in real life, right? I think that's kind of like an important function of fiction, right? um what I'm trying to think of some of the other characters. What did you think about Sowery's route?
so this is okay, she's the green hair girl, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember exactly. I think hers is it's one of those routes where it's just kind of her story kind of plays out on her own. I feel like it kind of feels like you are there being like a supportive person, but you're never really meddling.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yep.
so it's like this interesting kind of situation where it's like you are the person that she leans on, but it's never this. You seem to never really take action. There's one decision towards the one thing that I think is kind of funny about Welcome to Pia Carrot is that a lot of times is that like there'll be a decision at the end of like an arc. Maybe not a lot of times. Sometimes there's a decision at the end of the arc, and it like determines whether or not you sleep with them. And I do, but you can still get a good ending without sleeping with them. Like Yukiko, I didn't sleep with once the whole thing, and I kind of respect that. Of just like, oh, you don't have to actually, like this is not necessarily a part of getting like a good ending kind of thing. You kind of dodge
Yeah.
it. But
Yep.
in her case, it is very much like the really main decision you decide is like what is your sexual relationship with her at the end kind of thing, and like what does that mean? Like, are you kind of exploiting this situation? Do you truly understand what she's feeling in this moment before you just make this decision kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's especially interesting too as like a 18, 19 year old you know kid, for lack of I mean, just maybe from the perspective of somebody significantly older, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it's an interesting route. I mean, I think that most of these routes like I said, they're very rarely very deep, but I think the
Right.
concepts are interesting about all of them. Like they're all
Yeah.
these very
Yeah.
distinct concepts. I think maybe Satomi and Shoko's kind of overlap the most because they're kind of the two childhood friends. And how that relationship plays out is kind of aligned in some ways, I feel like,
Yeah.
with those two. But I feel like everybody else has their own like kind of distinct narrative. I will say, Kiyomi, your teacher that is also your cousin, which I kind of was curious because like I would think that the cousin part would play a bigger role in like how like odd this is, but it never really comes up. And I was curious about that because, in America, I think there is this kind of idea that there's some states where like cousin marriage is like more common and it's viewed as like a generally negative thing depending on what state you're in. Not telling you how to judge yourself, but I looked at the world map and to keep in mind, just for something being legal does not necessarily mean it's right. I'm not saying that. Saying that because it's legal in other parts of the world that it's the right
Sure.
decision.
Right.
Most
Wrong
places
or
in the world, it seems like it's cool to like marry your cousin, which I think is interesting. So I wonder, including Japan. So I don't know if there's any social stigma with that in Japan, but I was surprised the complete lack of any kind of exploration of that whatsoever. It
That's a
just was
really
kind
good
of like
point.
she's there and she is your cousin, but we're
Yep.
having a relationship kind
Yeah.
of thing, right?
No, that's
But
interesting.
apparently the US and China are like the two big places of just like no. So
Which is interesting too, because I think those are two like big population,
yeah.
uh, countries, and I wonder, like, I mean, I guess maybe India might be another one where you'd wonder, but like, I feel like the, I mean, I guess I don't really want to get into like, what are like positives or negatives,
Yeah.
but
And
like,
like I said, like just because it's legal, it doesn't necessarily mean that like these countries are like, oh, cool, 100%. It might just be technically it's legal kind of thing. So
sure, sure. But yeah, that's interesting because I feel like the main um, conflict, I guess, in that arc is really more that she's your teacher and an authority figure
yeah,
a little bit more than it is that she's your cousin, and that's kind of like I feel like the cousin thing almost leans a little bit more into like the childhood friend thing. Like she's almost like childhood friend number three.
Yeah, she's
Um,
kind of like slightly older than you. She's graduated. I don't know if she's gone through any kind of schooling at that point. Like,
yeah, I
I
mean
think she just kind
it's
of comes
literally
on
her
as a
first
teacher
year,
assistant. Yeah.
yeah, teaching. I think so. Yeah, she's probably like been through college and it just started teaching. So maybe she's what 5 years older than you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that's probably you're probably right about that because there are some scenes where she's like obviously supposed to be the adult in the room, but then she calls you up and it's like it's really dark outside. Can you please walk me home from the school
Yeah.
kind of thing? So that makes sense that is kind of the tension there. I don't think I thought about it that way. Maybe I was thinking about the fact too much. I was like just like there's like no mention of the cousin thing in here whatsoever. That's like what I was fixated on was like how do they just I tend to like stories that introduce really hard to solve problems. And in my head, the cousin problem's the hard to solve problem in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
situation. I mean, teacher, that's its own issue separately.
Yeah.
But, that was what I was thinking of. Um, but like I there's this old manga I used to read called Why Don't Men Wear High Heels Anymore? And it's about a dude who really loved high heels and stuff. And
Yep.
basically the social circle fallout of people finding out that he basically would wear high heels.
Mm,
It's a Korean thing, so I don't really know what the Korean culture is around that stuff.
sure.
But I like seeing those kind of situations where it's like here's somebody doing something that's like socially questionable and seeing what the fallout is and how do you piece something back together. I
Mm,
I like those kind of stories generally. So I think I was looking for something like that. And then it just was like it just never did it. It's just like, oh, okay, we're just
yep.
together now, I guess.
Yep. No, I think that might have been a little more interesting, and like it's possible I'm forgetting something too because I'm thinking back to like the two of you do have like kind of this. I don't know if you even unlock this scene because I think it's skippable or missable, but you do have this kind of like heartfelt conversation when you're basically on vacation
Yeah.
and like I'm trying to remember if any of that sort of implies any kind of like where they're trying to sort of wrestle with the fact that they're related in some capacity.
I
But
don't think so, other than them saying that, like, I've always loved you kind of thing.
yeah,
That
yeah,
kind of
it's
thing.
sort of
I think
like
the purpose of that scene mostly is just like Kiyomi does something that is very irresponsible.
yes,
And
which gets back to that like more of like the authority figure and like it's sort of about like I guess that like them growing up, her growing into her role as an adult and things like that,
yeah,
along with the main character.
I think you could also look at it, and I think I had a conversation about this recently. Just like a lot of adults don't really become adults.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true.
it's
Yep.
true of me. I'm a giant man child, right? I mean, I think everybody has some level of childishness in them,
Sure.
and I think that might be part of it as well. Of just like even though she's an adult, even though she's above you, she's still going to do things that are not the smartest decisions in those situations. Or she's going to rely on you even though you're younger, kind of thing, which I don't think is like a bad message. I think sometimes like the idea that like somebody's older is the authority figure is not always great because I think sometimes there are people who are younger who are much more capable of solving a problem than people who are older, kind of thing. Which I know
Yep.
in Japan there's like kind of some level of like seniority system around age as well, which I don't know, I don't understand it very well. It's no generally there's like Japan has a lot more of like a layered like societal status thing depending on if you're the older brother, younger brother, blah 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 kind of thing, right?
Yeah, there's a little more hierarchy, just sort of like built into the language and how you like address people who are of a different status than you are,
Mhm.
which it is just by virtue of them being older or your boss or your family or something like that.
Yeah. What did you think about Shiho, who's their assistant manager? Because in looking back at the CGs, I realized I never got a good ending with her, so I don't really remember what's going on. You don't even tell me what happened, but I'm just curious about your thoughts because I feel like she's the one I have the biggest mental blank on, and it's probably because I didn't actually get her ending. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point because I'm trying to think if I feel like I've finished the game and like I didn't unlock like a love scene with her. I'm almost wondering if she might be a character that doesn't have one.
yeah,
That's entirely possible too. Like and again, like I feel like that just sort of reinforces that this game, I think it's that's not really what it's about, right? And you might also ask too in that case, then, well, why is it in there, right? And man, I don't know, maybe if we want to address that, but yeah, Shiho, um, yeah, Shiho. I mean, it's interesting. She's also an authority figure, and I think the thing with Shiho is like she's kind of strict. She's kind of strict with you
Yeah.
when you first start. She's strict about punctuality, and I think you see some of that breakdown a little bit when like she herself, like there's a scene that I think sticks out a little bit because she just like skips work one day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's all the more impactful because like that's not the kind of thing that she does.
Yeah. And you see
And
it like all the time because of you're playing every other route and then she just doesn't show up basically. Like
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about the persistence of everybody's stories going on all the time. No matter what, she will miss that day.
yeah, that's
So
just a thing that happens in the game. Yeah, yeah, I think hers is a little more related to the fact, like the business part of the story, because another thing that your character is grappling with a lot is like your dad is like, I want you to take over this business,
yeah.
right? And I think he gives you kind of the option of like, if you want to go to college and you want to do something else, that's fine, but like realistically, he's like, your grades suck, and like you should take over this restaurant from me. Like, I'm giving you this opportunity, but you need to make a decision because you're
I will say
graduating
he doesn't
high
look
school.
very old. He doesn't look anywhere near retirement age. So
Right, right.
the
And
short term, it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon, at least.
yeah, well, I mean, in some capacity, it could be more of like I'm going to start grooming you to take
Mentor
over
you,
the
yeah,
business.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, in some ways, like it does seem a little bit like, does he really need to make that life important life decision right at that moment? But I feel like
Mhm.
a lot of times we are put under a ton of pressure at the young age of like 18 to make big decisions about our life. And anyway, I think that Shiho's story works into that as well, because I think that some of the stuff she's struggling with, like literally the same things.
Yeah.
Now that I
Basically,
think of it,
the outside pressure of expectations from somebody else, essentially.
yeah, yep,
Because I vaguely remember some parts of her story, but I just don't remember the resolution of all of it. But yeah, I
yeah,
think there's like some outside pressure from her family, I think,
there
of
is,
like
yeah,
to perform in certain ways or maybe
yeah.
to
Well,
I
I
don't know,
think
maybe
it's
not to work. I don't remember exactly, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think her family literally has like a similar, like a family business as well, and it's like she's kind of in the same kind of situation. Um, yeah, so it's an interesting story. If anybody, I feel like we should be the experts on Welcome to Pia Carrot, being the person who fan translated, like translated the script
I
for
mean,
the
that was
fan
like
translation. And
2008,
that's
right?
true. It was a long time
So,
ago, and you've just played through it. But yeah, if there's a
well,
Shiho love scene,
I played through
let us
half the
know.
game last year, and then Portland Retro Game Expo happened, and we did not ever follow up on it for a while. So
Yeah,
I returned to finish it off this year. So,
yeah,
but I want to talk about one more character I like.
okay, yeah,
Corey, the Obasan, old lady.
yes,
Yukari's mom. I like
the
her a
foxy
lot.
older lady. Yes,
She's fun. I like her. She basically is trying to play matchmaker with you. she's like, she's like, my daughter would love you. so she like starts prying into your life. She's like, what's your favorite color? What do you like? Kind of thing.
it's so
It's a good time.
relatable too. That just seems like the kind of thing that the nosy older lady would you'd run into especially when you're a young guy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think it's funny that she's like, my daughter looks just like me, and the main character is just like, oh, I don't want to date her if she looks just like you. But like, they don't look anything alike. I don't
Right,
know. Like,
right.
it is a very, very different character designs kind of
Yeah.
thing. So,
I mean,
but
it's funny too because it's like you could also imagine like maybe that's kind of what she looked like when she was young, and like some people age differently, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it's
In some ways, this is the character we're talking about earlier, or the girl in this arc. Her daughter is the character that I was talking about, where like she doesn't really ever show up outside of some very brief moments. In
yeah,
some
she's
ways,
almost like
this
this
is
hidden
the
character.
arc for the older lady. Just you, you get with her daughter instead, kind of
Yep.
thing. So
It's the secret arc when you wash a lot of dishes. Which I mean, there are other reasons to wash dishes in the game for like Shiho and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you wash dishes, and I think you do the custodian because I think the daughter walks by the front of the
Good
thing.
point.
But you
Yeah,
have to know which days to do it on, or at least
it might be one of the only
balance
reasons
it.
to do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the fastest arc in the game for sure. Um, Pro tip. Maybe I shouldn't say. I don't know. Pro tip. We were talking before. We were talking about maybe talking about the mouse controls with this game.
Yeah,
So this game supports mouse. I don't think it's on the box that it says supports mouse, but if you plug a mouse in, it works. And I think this game is using the same engine that First Kiss Story would eventually go use as well. I believe there's a lot of similarities between how the menus work and all that stuff,
interesting,
which
interesting.
makes me wonder if you ever tried to crack the game open at some point, if there's any work that could be reused between those two games at all.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I unfortunately would not be the person to
yeah, yeah. I
ask about
just
that.
wondering. I'm not saying Matt get to it, but um, but yeah, I think the mouse is fine for this game. But at the same time, it is kind of just like a lot of this game is just clicking a menu option. So it's not like Farland Story where you are moving a mouse across the screen constantly. So being able to be quick and precise has some real benefits there, right? Where this game, I think it's more of a novelty. And in some ways, I might say it's actually a detriment to use because what and this is true for First Kiss Story as well, but if you know what a PCFX controller looks like, there's the little levers in the middle, the mode A, mode B levers. And when you use mode 1 and put mode B, it turns it to skip mode. Later games like this would eventually implement like a smart skip mode where it would only skip dialogue you've never seen or you've seen before, and then it wouldn't show that. But this game doesn't have that. So you kind of need to be able to quickly choose when to skip text as you kind of play through the game over and over again and when to not skip text. And one of the challenges I have with some games like this is that like when you do that, if it doesn't have that feature built in, getting the game to stop skipping text before you are ready can like be hard. Because this is a physical switch on the controller during a loading screen, you can just set it either way. So if you know what a scene already is, to put it to skip, and if you don't know what a scene is, put it to not skip. And so you get time before the scene loads to even be able to set what you want to do,
Interesting.
which is
Did
really
did you
nice
wind up like making use of that feature when you played?
all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I went through all the characters, right? And you're gonna see probably like I don't know, would you say like 60 to 70% is all the same dialogue every time?
yeah, yeah. It's
And
you definitely get a lot of repeated stuff.
yeah, usually what I would do, I do my first playthrough, play it normally, don't skip text ever. And then when I do my next playthrough, honestly, the first couple times you're seeing enough scenes that I think skipping is it's a little harder to do there because you're seeing a lot of new scenes. But as you get to like maybe like your third or fourth route, you've seen most of the game text at that point beyond the text specifically to a character. So what I would do is just to kind of remind myself of like what the story was for this character as I go through, or just to kind of experience it from start to finish, is when I chose to go after a specific character, I would not skip their text even if I've read it before, just to make sure I have full context of like what they said again. Which part of this is because I played a chunk of this last year and then a chunk of it this year. But I think that was like very helpful. But yeah, this is the game I use in First Kiss Story as well. The games that I've used that skip function or that little lever with the most because you are constantly turning it on and off. I don't know how you do that on emulator. I will say I'm sure there's probably some setting somewhere you can do, um, but on a physical controller at least, I think that is a really essential thing to this game. I'm sure you can skip from like a menu. Again, it's just more of just like being able to physically switch it without much thought, kind of thing, because you're doing it nonstop, kind of thing. So, um,
Do do we want to talk a little bit about the game in the context of the PCFX and its library?
um, you wanna you wanna guide that? So,
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I guess I might just start off saying that one of my um, perspectives on this game after having played and enjoyed it on the PCFX, and then been interested in it enough to want to fan translate it, is that the PCFX does have a perception around it that it is a game system that is made that has a lot of these kind of games on it. And then when I say these kind of games, I don't even know that I don't even know that the perception is of games like Welcome to Pia Carrot. It's, I think, just the perception of like sexually explicit games, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I think uh, technically that is what Welcome to Pia Carrot is, right? You
Yes.
certainly wouldn't say that it is not. But I hope that during the course of our discussion, we've kind of been able to get across like um, what the appeal of Welcome to Pia Carrot is, and I don't think that it is. It's the love scenes, right? It specifically. I
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I kind of say is that like Last of Us 2, I think has sex in it, and that
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's a pornographic video game, right?
exactly. Yep.
It's a part of the narrative. I think a lot of times I was talking to you a bit before about this where I was watching an interview with was it Central Media,
Yeah, Central
the
Park
anime
Media.
company?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like the company that was trying to get anime into the US markets in the 90s. And they had an anime you recommended to me actually called something Tank Police. I'm trying to remember.
yeah. Dominion.
Dominion Tank Police, and there's the box art with like the ladies in like the spike bikinis on a motorcycle or something, right?
Yeah. The Puma
And
Sisters, I think.
I think he said something like the retailers called it porno smut, and he went and like pointed to the box and said what part of this is porno, and then he like asked them to define what was porno on the box, and they
Yeah.
couldn't figure out the way to say it basically. um, and it was more about just the lack of understanding and certain brain processes that basically make you hyper focus on certain things when you don't understand something, right? I think one thing I've told you before is that like when you don't understand something, I think the tendency as humans is to assume the worst intentions.
Mm,
So it's like, oh, I don't understand how this works, and then something happens, and especially if it affects me in a negative way, I'm going to assume the worst intentions, right? Game companies are greedy. I'm going to assume the worst intentions, and there's some truth to that to some extent. We are in a capitalism world, but I think when you start applying that intent to every person who works at a game company, that they're all just like money grubbing people, you are missing a lot, right?
yeah.
That
Yep.
kind of thing. And so I think sometimes, especially with gal games, I think even to some extent maybe not so much today, but I feel like some people have a lot of very similar language to like the 2000s of how we talk about these things, especially like older video game fans who might not have, taken time to engage with this stuff as much. It is still assuming the worst intentions from people, right? It assumes that you are making this game because you want to, sexualize high school girls or something like that, right? You are making the people playing this game are playing this game
Are
because it
playing it.
sexualizes high school girls.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you are doing this thing that is like very um, socially unacceptable in a lot of ways. Where I think probably the way that it's probably, if you were to give it, let's say, the best of intentions, this might not even be the best of intentions, but the idea that like when you're growing up, like high school is a very informative part of your life. I think that's part of why anime is so focused on high school a lot of times, is that in Japan it seems like that is a very important part of your life there. And
Coming of age stories are a thing,
yeah,
right?
and the unfortunate part of that to some extent is that part of like becoming sexually active is not a necessarily quick thing that happens. It happens over the course of many years, and it happens at a young age. And we determine people are vulnerable during that time period, right? And so we really want to protect those people, right? But also that doesn't change that they are sexually active, right? Like I went to a high school called Rockdale County High School, and I think we had a documentary made about our school because there was so much sex happening there. It was like a
Was it
bunch of
like?
like STDs were going around and stuff, and like it's crazy. And
Did you
but
have
that's
the
just
like
like a
the
part of it.
teen pregnancies and?
Yes,
All of
absolutely.
that.
That stuff was
Yes.
all around, and that is a
Yeah.
part of life. And that's, not that this game is glorifying that kind of experience, right?
Right.
But I think that is still a part of that experience, and like I think you want to value those experiences you had in past parts of your life, and like when you're younger, a part of that is still in you. I guess like from when you were young, you're part of that's still in you, right? Like a
Yeah.
part of that high
As
school
you're
experience.
adult.
You're an adult, but that high school you is still a part there, and like I think you can appreciate that story for what it is. And then also you have to ask, like, who are they selling this game to? Probably guys who are just out of high school, in college, early. So that is like the experience that they just kind of got out of. And I could imagine there's an appeal of like, what if that happened different? You're alone in college, smoking cigarette, salary man, just got started. What if I dated that girl kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if I worked at Welcome to Pia Carrot and then hit on everybody?
Yeah. Maybe you could just kind of relive your your high school days a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, like kind of vicariously, and just be like, yeah, what if? What
It's a
if?
very like I think human thing. I think, but the thing is that again, I think when you have the worst of intentions, or when you assume the worst of
Assume. Yeah.
intentions, and then you also pair it with the vulnerability of these types of people in real life, and then you make that jump from real life to
Fiction.
fictional, that's going to start causing problems. And like the thing I want to say is that I'm not sitting here saying that like you shouldn't feel, if you feel uncomfortable, that you're wrong. That's part of what's going to happen. Culture determines a lot of things of what we view as acceptable and not acceptable. And I really want to respect that you feel that way, whether it be, just feeling like this content shouldn't exist, or the feeling that like this has a negative thing, like a negative impact on society, right? I think the thing that I am maybe a little unpopular in feeling is that I think media, in the way that media has been very positive for me, video games I feel like has taught me a lot of lessons. I think it also can be very negative, and I think the way that um, I view violence and sexual content has probably been partly formed by the media I consume. Right, not those things two together, but individually as well. Right, um, and I do believe that's part of it, but at the same time, I think we operate in a world with the understanding of that, like we can explore these things in fiction without it necessarily resulting in the worst outcome every time, right?
Right.
Um,
And I think that point about sort of assuming the worst intentions, I think is particularly pertinent, I think, to the PCFX as well, because I've talked before, but I feel about this, but I feel like PC Engine fans in particular, I think, hold a lot of resentment toward the PCFX. At least, maybe I should say, like Western PC Engine fans, because the PCFX does have a lot of like anime styled games, a lot of adventure
gal games.
games. Yeah, a handful of these romantic adventure games. And so I think the kind of the worst intentions assumption that I think is easy to make is that, oh, NEC saw that the PCFX was failing because they had made a stupid decision and didn't make it like the PC Engine and put all the games that I liked from the PC Engine like onto the PCFX, and so they put some porno games on it in order to try to sell it to more people as like I don't know, a last ditch effort or something.
Which I will
And I
say,
think
Dokusei 2 is an adult game, and
right,
it was the best selling game of PCFX as far as we know. So, like, there's some level of truth to that, but obviously, this is not a porno game, right? And I assume I've never played Dokusei. I assume very similar thing. I think it's very unfortunate that they named the re-release of that like, was it like
what was it,
Steaming Hot
banging?
Summer Banging Adventure or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that?
yeah,
I was just like, that is
banging
not the
summer or
way.
something.
I mean, I guess if you want to lean into it, then there you go. But I feel like that's kind of a, to me, that gives the very wrong impression. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
but
think we've mentioned, but like Tokimeki Memorial, had just been released and kind of like was hugely successful on the PC Engine,
yeah,
and so it and and the PC 98, I think, had a lot of developers that were developing these kind of romantic adventure games. So it makes sense that um, that some of those were ported to the PCFX, like Welcome to Pia Carrot, and that that those enjoyed some level of success, not just on the PCFX, but on the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation,
Yeah.
and as well as PC.
And I think
Um,
the thing that I think often is like these games often get sold with all ages version as well. So like there's clearly value to, these games without these types of scenes. I do think there are scenes there certain character traits are kind of accentuated by the sexual scenes kind of thing. I think Rika's like the sexual content kind of plays into how she fills in, her pain to some extent. Um
that's pretty important to her story, right?
Yeah, it's not this game. It's Katawa Shoujo, but there's a character in that like the way they interact with you, like before and after you sleep with them, is incredibly different. Um, and it's because like this like part of them comes out when they sleep with you, and like it becomes a part of their relationship with you, and that affects how they interact with you going forward. So like, there's definitely ways these kind of scenes can play a role in like how a story develops, right? I'm not going to say it's always that case. There's going to be times where I feel like there's just the scene's just kind of there to be like, hey, all right. Again, as someone who's like asexual, it's just kind of like, okay, when I stumble across them, I'm just like, I could do without this, but I sure you can throw that in front of me. But I think Welcome Pia Carrot is generally very tasteful with its placement of those scenes. I When I'm thinking of those scenes where I'm like, okay, sure. I'm thinking more of other games I've played on PC. Where there are games that I've played that I'm substantially unhappy with how they place their erotic scenes. It's like, this is an interesting game, but all this erotic stuff's getting in the way. Get it out of here.
Right, right.
Where I feel like Welcome to Pia Carrot, well, it's maybe not the most like this game did not like jump out at me as like, oh, this is an amazing integration. I think everything makes sense, right? I think all these parts generally make sense with that. I think the weirdest thing to me is that like sometimes there's like two or three cases where like the girls come over to your house, and in my mind it's like my family's home, and like suddenly you want to get in bed, and I'm like, that's so I don't like I don't like that at all. Like, there's one door between me and my dad. Please.
Or your sister down the
Yeah.
hall. But but yeah, I think viewing Welcome to Pea Carrot in particular through the lens of a coming of age story, I think should inform people of exactly what to expect from this and kind of like where it's coming from, and
Yeah.
and I think my only regret is like I when I helped, fan translate this, I did not in any way mean to reinforce, negative stereotypes about the PCFX specifically as a gaming platform. But I hope that the work that we've done, you and I sort of talking about other games on the PCFX and talking about this game, maybe can, is helping um, to just give a different perspective around that, and hopefully maybe something that's a little more accurate.
Yeah, I will say this because I know for basically since we first podcast we talked to each other, I think you've mentioned this of like this feeling of like I wish it didn't create this scenario.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that probably existed no matter what. I think
Yep.
what you did is you added more understanding, in my opinion, because
Okay.
you made it in a situation where somebody can sit down and understand what this is, and they're not just
Mm.
going to skip all the text looking for all the horny scenes, right?
Right.
Like they're going to be able to appreciate who these characters are and what they're doing, right? And what's important about the narrative. And so, like,
Yeah.
obviously, if somebody's coming in like I was expecting the worst and they don't give it the time, like I ended up giving like Katawa Shoujo the time and like sitting down and really thinking about like what did I play and how did I enjoy it and why did I enjoy it, I think I think you're probably just not going to win them over no matter what, right? I think there are some people that unless they may not, I don't want to be rude because I think there's probably parts of my life that this is absolutely true as well. But you only have so much time to invest in certain things. And there are some people that I see that are content creators, not speaking to them negatively, but they're going to talk about the most standard way to talk about something. And if the PCFX is established as this thing, this is what they're going to talk about, right?
Or even sometimes the most negative way to talk about something because it
Yeah, you can
creates a
make a
gateway.
thumbnail out of it, and like that's the big story. But I do think PCFX is a system that has had that reinforcement even before the kind of like the narrative gets like pushed on YouTube kind of thing, right?
Sure, sure. Before
Um,
YouTube.
yeah, I mean, and to be very clear, a lot of this stuff was just really hard to understand, right? This is a lot of stuff we didn't really have a great access to in the US. Like now you can go on Nintendo Switch and buy a bunch of dating games all the time, but good luck if you're on a GameCube, right? Like you are not going to find an experience like this on those systems, right? So trying to build understanding in a world where the only people who know about this is like people who bought like Graduation 2 on a Windows XP machine, right? It's just the expansion of access needs to be there before anyone can really sit down and take something seriously. Unfortunately, sometimes otherwise, again, worst of intentions, weird Japanese dating sim, lonely Japanese men getting into dating sims. And like you said before, you're not really romantically connecting to these characters. It is in some ways an appreciation for different types of romances out there and how you can portray that in those character stories, right? It is a storytelling thing at the end of the day, right? It is its own unique narrative. And I think games like this allow for certain narratives that other video games don't allow, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And I really appreciate you kind of putting it like that because, um, I feel like this has haunted me a bit for quite a while, and I don't think I've ever stopped and really thought about it from the perspective of, like rather than kind of like sweeping this under the rug, right? Like basically being able to give people the opportunity to play this game and see what it's like and make their own opinions about it is actually I think that's the much better way of approaching this
yeah.
because I think I was saying before like I don't play a lot of these kind of games really, but like since playing Welcome to Pia Carrot, I have taken an interest in playing romantic adventure games here and there, and between that or maybe like animes that I've watched and things like that, sometimes they are talking about subjects that aren't necessarily talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated when I've sort of encountered things, even if it's just like a coming of age story or something like that, where it's like, okay, we're going to talk about some of these things that are part of being human and part of being, whatever, like, and they're presented as a narrative that's either thoughtful or entertaining or whatever. And I've just been so thankful to have been able to experience that story,
Mm-hmm.
um, that I'm just like, wow, like it just reinforces my faith in humanity, kind of, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm so glad that people are making things like this, and so yeah, I guess from that perspective, I'm really glad that I was able to make this a little bit more accessible to more people, and yeah, I hope people can play it and kind of make their own opinions. What do you feel like? I guess after having played this, much more recently than I have, and sort of gotten to experience it fresh, but after having played some things like Kawato Shoujo or First Kiss Story. Maybe you've already addressed that, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank with you. When I first started the game, it was kind of like, oh, more of this,
yeah,
eventually. And I think and I think the thing I sympathized with immediately because I knew you liked this game was that like the experience you had with this game sounded very similar to the experience I had with First Kiss Story. I think you told me that when we talked about First Kiss Story the first time. You're like, that sounds like the experience I had with Welcome to Be a Carrot,
yeah,
right? And both of us have not played a lot of games in this genre. I recently on my own channel did a podcast with Bowl of Lentils about adventure games and Japanese adventure games in general. Cause I'm just like, a lot of people will say that like I am really big in this space. And I'm like, I've played like four. I
yeah,
think I
yeah,
just talk loud. It's the difference. And I think I also try to talk to people in a way that general audiences can understand it. So it's a lot easier for me to reach people who probably like, oh, you're like educated on this. And it's like, no. And so like initially I definitely felt that. And I think I will say like part of my experience with Welcome to Pia Carrot probably is in some ways demystifying First Kiss Story for me. Like being able to see these mechanics and what works in my own language let me kind of transplant some of those feelings onto First Kiss Story to make that
Mm,
experience make sense. Because I think at the
sure.
end of the day, First Kiss Story narratively, not really. I mean, I think it's more dense in text, but I don't think anything crazy is happening there at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you haven't had an opportunity to play it in English
Yes.
yet
There are
either. So
some weird supernatural things. There's the weird like Grim Reaper guy that looks like the Sword Art Online main character for some reason, and he just like shows up with a sword in your school. Um, but and it's like fun and like there's a lot of things I love about First Kiss Story in that regard, right? And I think First Kiss Story is a game that shows a lot more generally from what I've seen. But at the same time, I think a lot of people. I mean, I can't speak for our audience in specific because I think we'd probably attract a certain type of audience that's probably more knowledgeable about this stuff, right?
yeah,
But like I think for me and you at least, these are early experiences we have with these genres. And so in a lot of ways they are kind of like the first time playing Super Mario Brothers, right? Where they're like, this is the first time I played a platformer and welcome to Pia Carrot. I think for a lot of people probably was that, right?
yeah,
Especially
kind
when
of
you translated
definitive
that.
for us. Yeah,
Because when you're translating that, this is like the time when like Manga Gamer couldn't even get their games on Steam, right? So like the idea of accessibility on this stuff was really tough. So you probably were reaching a pretty similar audience to what they were reaching at the time. So that stuff is a lot more present now. So it's hard for me to say like if you've been playing these kind of games on Switch, come back, baby. Welcome to Pia Carrot's right for you because it may just feel ancient.
right. It's a product of its time, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
but like I said, I can't speak. But playing Amagami, which is a PS2 game, so I don't know how relevant recent is that. Amagami is a game that has a lot more of like how it tells you where to go places, and I appreciate that Pia Carrot hides a lot of it from you. But that's something I can appreciate as somebody who like appreciates, I think, game design that isn't necessarily the easiest to enjoy, right? I'm a Final Fantasy 11 guy. That's a very abrasive game that like wants to destroy you at all times and destroy your time. But
Welcome to Pia Carrot, the Dark Souls of
yeah,
dating
there you
sims.
go. I think what I've heard is Tokimeki Memorials maybe that of just
Yeah,
like that is
yeah.
an intensely hard game to get any ending on.
I
But
feel like the main character's route is
one
is
thing that I think both of us don't have a lot of experience in the space, but this was a pretty, I think, transformative time for that type of game when this game was coming out, right? I think Tokimeki Memorial happened. That had a very specific style, and you're having games like I think Two Love is actually getting an English translation for the remake that's coming out soon.
yeah.
So
Well, that's the
Two
thing I
Love
was
was
going to
coming out.
say. A lot of these are getting remade.
Yeah.
Games from this time period.
Dokusei is available as
Yeah,
well. So there's a lot of games from this time you can check out. And because I think this was a very like the early ages of this, maybe I shouldn't say the early ages, is a very transformative time for this genre, it feels like. Um, and so I feel
they
like the
really
PCFX kind of
exploded. I
landed in
feel
there.
like after like 2000, 2001 or so. So this is before that, right? It's a
Yeah, slightly before that, yeah.
yeah, it's a slightly different time.
But it felt like the genre was kind of developing, is what it
Yeah.
felt like. They were trying to
Yes.
figure out what makes sense. I think also focusing more on narrative. There's probably a reason why First Kid Story has a lot more narrative than Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Yep.
Probably expectations had been changing on what to do with these things. So yeah, but I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind. But I think both me and you only really have the vague idea that that's what's happening, not that we're like able to map it out for you. So, but yeah, I mean, and this is like with Welcome to Pia Carrot. There's Dokusei. There's First Kiss Story. Is there anything else on the PCFX quite like this otherwise, or is this kind of for this type of game kind of the one?
I mean, for this type of game, I
Not
would say
like
the
one,
only
but
other
that
things,
group.
yeah, might be like have to go into the non-explicit games like Zoko Hatsukoi Monogatari is probably gonna have a similar feeling.
And First Kiss
Um,
Story isn't explicit either. That is 18 recommended, but there's no
right.
scenes.
Yeah. Really, the
But
only ones are in terms of like this kind of romantic adventure game, Welcome to Pia Carrot and Dokusei and Can Can Bunny.
oh, Can
DX.
Can Bunny, that's the other one for sure.
Yeah.
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 Can I ask you a question about Rolfie?
Yeah.
What is her game like exactly? I know this is a Pia Carrot podcast, but do you know much about like how her game is structured?
I love her game, but I've only gotten a little ways into it. It is
Without
it's
going into too
like
much detail, just as a note, just
yeah,
to kind of
yeah,
like put it in comparison to Welcome to Pia Carrot.
it's like a raising sim adventure game.
Okay.
So basically, and in a way, Welcome to Pia Carrot has that sort of raising element too, or you might even just call it RPG element, where you're adjusting stats by doing things. Rolfie is pretty similar. You're adjusting her stats by choosing to do different things. So honestly, it's pretty similar to Welcome to Pia Carrot, and then there's kind of a narrative element of it. Um, I I've only read in Japanese that there's some sort of pivotal moment, it feels like, in the game where things change a little bit. And I think it's kind of like probably in Welcome to Pia Carrot, where you're going to get one of the girls' endings or not based on how your stats are and what you've done throughout the game. I think you get like a similar sort of thing in Rolfie, where something happens, and depending on how you've raised her, the game's going to
Okay.
progress differently how you've done that. But yeah, similar kind of game, but just definitely a different narrative, more
That's good
about
to know because I never really knew what that game was. So I wasn't sure
yeah,
if it was like a dating role feed kind of thing or
yeah.
something else. So,
Nope. It's Rolfie. She goes to school. She meets a bunch of characters. She's got a crush on this one guy, and you get to go into town and go shopping after school, and either slack off on your studies or not, while your sister's like, I don't know, tell
I
you to
am
tell
for
you to
the
get your work done.
Zoku Hatsukoi Monogatari.
Yeah,
I question how similar it is to a game like this. I don't know how much you've played of it.
I have
Uh,
not played it maybe at all. So
I've played it a little bit.
yeah,
It might be this kind of game to the extreme.
okay,
Because every day you get like 15 schedule items. You schedule your day out by like
interesting.
every 15 to 30 minutes. It's crazy. It's scary
Huh.
because you're like, this giant screen of things just appeared and I
I
have to
wonder
schedule it out.
if it's a little
Um,
more like graduation almost in that respect, where it's like kind of like a simulation.
That's the hard thing. So I need to spend more time with it because, like, I do want to make because I've been making like Twitter posts and stuff, and I really like to talk about this game because I think the concept is interesting. Which I think we talked about before. It's like the idea that you're going through multiple phases of your youth,
Yeah,
and so you're like you can't play as toddlers, but that is like a part of their experience. They talk about being toddlers a lot, and they'll like pull out pictures of themselves as kids playing and
as
stuff like
as
that.
kids and stuff. Yeah,
And then you can do middle school, high school, and then it seems like there's kind of like a prologue kind of thing. And you always have the childhood friend that's there. And the thing I'm not sure about is like if the characters that are surrounding you change or if there are other characters who are now older as well. Um,
yeah, that's
and
interesting.
there's some weird stuff where I think like when you are like in middle school, it seems like there's like maybe a weird emphasis on your teacher as well being like a part of this relationship that you're having with these other characters,
Sure.
but it's a very heavy schedule focused game.
Interesting.
It is kind of crazy when I pulled it up. I was like, what is going on? So I that is maybe the what's that game called with the ship Konpeki no Kantai? Maybe the
Yeah,
Konpeki no Kantai of of dating sims on the PCFX. Or just like menus everywhere. So very complicated menus it feels like, but yeah, so but yeah, I think this is I do think this is like in my opinion, a very good game to choose to translate. I think one that we had that poll recently about like what games to translate on the PCFX, and I hate being that guy because I know it's so hard for me not to be that guy in that video of just like, yeah, Landgressor, yeah,
yep,
it looks. I mean, not knowing enough about Landgressor to like really say too much, but it's like it's something that I recognize, something that looks like a very usual thing for me. Um, and then I can't help but like look at these other PCFX games and be like, this would be so interesting to know what's going on here, though, right?
yeah. I
So
feel like something like Langrisser is one of the more like recognizable touchstones on the system to what I would call like your average gamer, or maybe like like a at least like a retro gamer or RPG
yeah,
tactical RPG gamer, right? Whereas like I think one of the things that's interesting about the PCFX is like it has some interesting games on it that like aren't your typical run of the mill, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean always that they're great, but they're interesting. And
I think Welcome to Pia Carrot's like a really good example of, for a Westerner, what the system offers. If you're
sure,
older than the age of 18,
yes,
then I think it is a very good touch point on the system to be like, what is this, and how do I appreciate these games? It's a very
yeah,
good entry point for that.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a good entry point, yeah, for romantic adventure games. Certainly, I like it. It's fun because like not just is it like something on the PCFX, but it's part of a larger genre that I think a lot of people don't have exposure to, or at least more so now than ever.
I feel
Or
like
people are getting exposure.
I feel like broadly I might have trouble saying that because I don't really know what's out there today, and I
Yeah,
don't know like what. I feel like, as we said earlier, this game's a little obtuse in some ways, and just like there's a lot of just unknowns.
yeah,
But I appreciate that, and like I feel like the first time might be the best time to appreciate that if you play a game like this versus playing something modern, then coming back and trying to figure out what this thing is. I don't know. Who
yeah.
knows?
I mean,
What is
if
your
people
favorite
are
romantic adventure game that
yeah,
to start? Let me know.
if people are localizing Two Heart and Memories Off and stuff like that, we've reached a point that I don't know if I ever thought we would reach.
I want to ask you a quick question. I know we're pretty deep in this, but behind
Yeah, yeah,
you, welcome to
yep.
Pia Carrots there. Now,
Oh yeah,
those are not the Pia Carrots I recognize, or at least one of them isn't. The top left one, I think. Is that Pia Carrot 2?
yeah. Pia Carrot. This is Pia Carrot 2, 3, and it might be Pia Carrot Go, I think, or
Okay.
Geo. Yeah.
Does do you have similar feelings for those games, or
No, no,
okay,
because I haven't gotten a chance to really play them.
okay.
What I wanted to do was just translate them, like I did for Welcome to Pia Carrot 1, and I think I started working with Esper Knight on Welcome to Pia Carrot 2, and we actually made a lot of progress on that. It was the Windows PC version,
Yeah.
which this probably is. So
Do you
it's,
know
yeah,
what version of Windows that
Windows
that would have been asking?
95.
95.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Are
Um,
those like floppy disks in there? Or we got is that CD at least?
I believe it's a CD
Okay.
for this one. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I'm like kind of negligent as a Pia Carrot fan, so to speak. But yeah, I
I don't
like the
think
first
anyone's
game a
gonna
lot.
call you a negligent Pia Carrot fan, having gone
Yeah,
and fan translated the English
the
version of the game.
right. Um, but yeah, anyway, so we did. I did actually get a lot of the way through the script for Welcome to Pia Carrot 2.
Okay.
Um, and I actually do quite like what I translated and what I've seen of it. I've played a little bit. It is it's actually probably the most popular Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's I would say the one that Japanese gamers associate with Welcome to Pia Carrot more than the first game.
When I look
Um,
up "Welcome to Pia Carrot" with like the actual Japanese text, Pia Carrot 2 is what shows up most of the
yeah,
time. So
yeah, and that song was pretty popular too, from what
the
I understand. Go Go Waitress, yeah,
go waitress, yeah.
yeah, they'd like play it on the radio and stuff.
That opening video, I don't know if you saw it, but like there's a scene where she like is running down like a hallway and turns around and looks at you, and it's the most awkward looking pose. It's just like she's like she like looks back at you. So, anyways, well, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for letting me have this experience, Matt,
My pleasure. My pleasure.
and
I'm
for
so
everybody
glad
else.
that you took the opportunity to play it.
Sorry it took me like 5 years of us
That's
talking to finally get to it. So.
I feel like there's a lot of that we haven't gotten to quite a few things here,
Yeah, but
myself included.
for the audience, if you haven't played Welcome to Peak and over the age of 18, although we now have that requirement in the Discord. So if you're listening, well, I guess if you're in the Discord, go, go check it out. I think it is worth your time. Like I said, if you are just like, I don't want to see anime girls with their heads hanging out. Um, that's a weird way to put that. Anime girls on screen. Like I said, there's a lot more exploration aspects to it. And I think sometimes just being aware that those things are like good things about the game can help you keep an eye out for it more and help you appreciate it more. So hopefully that's something that if you haven't liked the game before or you haven't ever tried it, just think about it in that way in addition, just to like try to figure out what to do with it. Again, chill on the guide initially maybe, and then just like wait until you've kind of had your fill, and then you could, get the rest of the narrative just blast their guide like I did. So anyways, do you have any closing thoughts you want to add, Matt?
Honestly, I don't think so.
You don't want to say go play Welcome Pia Carrot
Go
like you
play
usually
Welcome to
do?
Pia Carrot. That's a good point. I feel like this whole episode is us saying go play Welcome to Pia Carrot.
Well, now's the time. You have to, if marking, you got to add like a call to action at the end.
Yeah.
So
If you're not convinced to play Welcome to Pia Carrot at this point, I don't know what else we could say.
what would be it's kind of like there's gag games in there, mini gag games. I posted about this on Twitter recently.
There are.
So it's
Oh,
like you're
actually,
getting multiple games at once.
can I mention? So I chose. So yeah. So there's basically, if you do certain things in the game, and it's basically a route, right? I
Yeah.
think you kind of have to do the route to get the. So I don't even know if we mentioned your buddy Daisuke.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So you do have a guy friend in the game, and he ends up making some comics for Comic Market, some Dojin, right? Some like amateur fan comics,
And you can go
and
and like interact with like some crowds and stuff like that.
yeah,
And that.
I chose to localize this at the time as Dirty Comics, so you can get Dirty Comic 1 and Dirty Comic 2 in the course of the game. Um, I just wanted to mention I got some major flack about this on Twitter. Uh, I doubt it's somebody just mentioned, and I'm pretty sure it was in relation to Welcome to Pia Carrot, how this was localized. So I do apologize. At this,
Is it just like Dojin? Is that what it is initially, or
yeah, I mean, like Dojinshi, I think is sort of a catch-all, for
fan made
these
works, basically?
fan-made works. Yeah, exactly. And so, in this case, I feel like I was translating this back in what, like 2006, 7, 8. We
Yeah.
released the patch in 2009. At the time, I don't think I felt like I could just write in Dojin or Dojinshi and be doing my due diligence in communicating to people like what these things were in the context of the game, and being that I was considering this a dirty game and you could get dirty comics in it from your buddy Yusuke or Daisuke.
And some of them do have some spicy content in it, for sure.
Yeah, but really what they are, I think, is those little gags. And I think one of them, though, might actually be a bit of a cameo for another game from Cocktail Soft slash Fairy Tale. Um, I'd have to bring up the title because I forget what it's called. But they also made like Can Can Bunny, and they made other games for PC 98, and I think that was kind of a little Easter egg like advertisement for one of their other games.
Yeah, they do include Can Can Bunny a couple times. One, a more direct advertisement of just like, check Can Can Bunny on the PCFX, buy it
Yeah,
now,
yeah, buy
kind
it
of
now.
thing. And then there's one that I think it's like featuring a character from one of the sequels to Can Can Bunnies, I think is what it is. Um, there's like
Yeah, I'd
another
have to check.
girl, but I don't know Can Can Bunny well at all, so don't attack me, please.
Yeah,
Um,
Suwadi is like the main girl, like kind of a goddess character, I think.
Yeah, and then there's a another one that feels like it's like reusing assets from another game that's like medieval kind of thing. I could be wrong, but it just looks like it looks like we have a lot of extra graphics just so we can throw in here and we can make a story out of it. So I assumed that was from a different video game, but I don't know
Right.
because it was so out of place, but it seemed like it was just kind of running with it. So, but yeah. And yeah, I totally agree with you in 2006, 2007. Like when you're localizing games, it's not just about, uh, you know, what America understood today. It's also about what they understood then. And trying to throw Dojin text on the screen and somebody being like, what is that? Probably would have been very challenging. Admittedly, if you're launching a PCFX game, you might know. but
Yeah.
you never know, right?
So, disclaimer: not all Dojin goods are dirty comics.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. That's I don't think that association is as big of a thing anymore. I could be wrong. I might just be in the right crowds now, but yeah. So, anyways, that was a long way to say welcome Pia Carrot, but thank you so much for coming. I almost said my website, PCFX fan club. Join the Discord if you haven't. If you've played Welcome to Pia Carrot, let us know what your thoughts are. Part of me wants to do like a character poll at some point, but I don't know. We'll see.
Fun. Yeah.
I've been thinking about doing like some silly little thing that it might be relevant for, so I haven't quite decided to do it yet, but we'll see. And then also, again, if you are feeling gracious, you want to donate, we have our Ko-fi. You can go donate there. I have been posting a lot on social media lately. I seem to have gotten some traction there, so I'm just trying my best to get that traction going, and spreading the good word of the PCFX. I think part of that is also driven by the fact that I want people to know more about the more unique titles on the PCFX as well. But it does take quite a bit of work right now. I have a little bit of the free time at the moment to dedicate extra time to that, but we'll see long term. But I do want to keep it active and busy. So if you haven't been following the socials, then that's probably worth checking out if you want to just learn random little tidbits on Twitter and Blue Sky about that stuff too. So, and then also we have merch. If you want to go check out the store, we'll have links to those below. Links to all those things below. So, all right. Anything else?
Not for me.
That's gonna be it. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for listening to the Pia Carrot Show and playing it, hopefully. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye-bye.